Well, I'm very glad that you asked this question, John, at the time when we're thinking about World Population Day, which is on July the 11th, which is exactly the reason for World Population Day, for us to think about these questions and what it means. Overpopulation as a term is somewhat out of mode now because it's very subjective. Overpopulation from whose perspective? How many people should we have living where? Are we really able to determine our carrying capacity? How many people can the planet support? So we no longer speak about overpopulation, but it's a good question because World Population Day allows us to think about how many people exist on the planet, where those people are living, and what is the composition of the population. So World Population Day really is about young people, about adolescents, about couples and how many children they would like to have, about women's empowerment, about our elderly parents and how do we ensure that they can have a good lifestyle, and about people's rights and ability to choose how many children they'd like to have and when they can have those children. Population is critical to thinking about sustainability and human well-being, and how we live and subsist on the planet. A number of studies have indicated that population dynamics, so how many people, where people live, and the composition of the population affects natural resources in terms of what's available for us to live well, to have a good lifestyle, but also in terms of where people choose to live and how that makes them vulnerable. This is particularly important when we think of climate change and the impacts of climate change today. We need to only think of Superstorm Sandy and then the impact it has had on us here in the United States, and imagine that in many developing countries. So globally, we are looking at establishing sustainable development goals that will take into effect later this year, come into effect later this year. So thinking about population as critical to human well-being, the well-being of the environment, economic production, and questions around equity and well-being for all is very important. I think there are many countries around the world, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, where we see questions around population and population growth and population dynamics as being very critical. Ethiopia is one of those countries that has a very progressive population policy and a health system that is reaching out to remote rural areas where there's a need to provide access to clean environment and safe services to help people plan their families. So Ethiopia is emerging as very much a success story where we see issues around population, health, and environment being integrated in a way that's making a difference in people's lives today and serving as an example for Africa and for the world. Some of the barriers that inhibit us from making progress when we think of population issues are very interesting. We know what the solutions are. We know that they are cost effective and that they have an impact in a short period of time. There is a perception among the American public that it costs more to invest in these services. So that is one question. There are cultural barriers in terms of use of family planning services. Couples who are looking to make decisions with regard to how many children they would like to have. Sometimes the woman would like to have less children. We know globally 222 million women would like to have less children. Some of their husbands would like to have more children. So there's some need for negotiating within the couple decision-making unit, within the family, to determine how to have less children and what does it mean to space those children. So one barrier associated with that is access to services. Another barrier is education and information provision. So on July the 10th, we are hosting an event with the executive director of the UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, the deputy administrator for health from USAID, and the president and CEO of Population Action International to look at youth and what does it mean in terms of adolescence. Globally, we have the largest cohort of adolescents that we have had ever. So it's an important force to think about in terms of population numbers. We're looking at how do we capitalize on this youthful population, which is often called a demographic dividend. How do we make sure that they have useful and meaningful employment to make a difference in their lives today? How do we empower them? And how do we think about the best ways of doing that? This is what we'll be talking about on July 10th here at the Woodrow Wilson Center.